My name is Damali Sali and I welcome you to this episode of the Ideation Corner. The Ideation Corner is a space where ideas are discussed and dissected, and today I host Geofrey Mutabazi. Geofrey is an emerging leader who is passionate about African entrepreneurship. He started his first business at the tender age of 14, selling software and video games. He graduated in 2019 with a degree in business administration and also has 4 years of work experience. Geofrey is a member of the Global Shapers community, and also he participates in the Climate Reality Leadership Corps started by Al Gore. Geofrey is also the founder and CEO of ChargeCore Technologies, which makes owning electric cars and mobile devices convenient and affordable. I am very happy to have Geofrey on the Ideation Corner today. Geofrey, you're very welcome. How are you?
I'm okay. Thank you for the introduction. It makes me feel a lot more important.
You feel like, is that me? Yes, it is you.
Maybe.
But maybe tell me more about, ChargeCore Technologies. What was the idea behind you setting it up?
So as you mentioned, I have 4 years of working experience. I started off in enterprise solution sales with a company called SMS1. And what we're actually doing is we were selling software services. And I used to have a lot of meetings in coffee shops, in different offices. And I would be basically on my feet, pretty much most of the hours of the day. And one of the things I used to face was battery life. My phone would go, my phone battery would go low like every other time during the day, and over time it got even worse because I had to charge 2 or 3 times. And with using Uber, Safe Border, using a bit of mobile payments once in a while, having to keep up with things at the office, it was kind of really hard for me to get a charge on the go. And that's why I decided to start ChargeCore Technologies, which is pretty much phone charging and basically a charging infrastructure company that's solving the energy access problem from the side of mobile devices and also venturing into electric vehicles. So basically setting up phone charging stations in public places where if you're out of battery, you're at a restaurant, you're in a bar, you're in a shopping mall or a bus station, you can easily put your phone in there and charge for pretty much 10-20 minutes. And that's how the idea of ChargeCore came out.
ChargeCore, just a bit.
Because in most cases you don't want to charge the entire phone to like 100%.
You just want to get to 50.
Exactly, 50%, 30%, and then you continue with your day. But that's why we actually came up with the name ChargeCore.
And it's interesting, the core.
Yes.
It was like when I was reading the profile, I was like, ChargeCore, that's interesting. So where are these stations? Where they are?
So currently we have one at in Naguru, and we have another one we're deploying at Kenji's. Naguru, it's at a place called Rosaho, Rosaho Bistro and Curio Shop. It's more like a restaurant. And then we're also deploying one at Kenji's. Kenji's at Acacia Mall, behind Acacia Mall, former Iguana.
Okay.
Yes, so
is it free?
It's
I just walk into for my iguana and just pull my.
Well, it's not free. All good things are not free. Sorry for the modification, but whoever came up with that has to bear with my addition. But yes, it's not free. It's basically 2,000 shillings, but that really depends on the location. So at events we charge different rate, and but public locations like bars and restaurants we charge a standard of 2,000 shillings. That's for 1 hour of charge, but really in most cases you'll need only 30 minutes, 45 minutes. You don't really want to be away from your phone that long. So it's 2,000 shillings, and you get yourself
at least 50%
yes.
charge. You mentioned events. How does that work?
So yes, we've worked with the biggest events right before the pandemic. We worked with some of the biggest events in the country. We worked with Nyege Nyege Festival.
Oh,
We worked with all the blankets and wine festivals. We worked with Rukundo Egumeho, which most people know as Bachiga Nation. We worked with Kwegonza Avenue, which is the Batoro, Batoro Banyoro kind of festival, and many other events across the country. So for events, we set up basically a charging point where people can walk up, which people can walk up to, and we can actually charge about 40 phones at a time.
At any one time?
Yes. So at the event.
It could be like 40 phones plugged in?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
At any one time.
Are you currently only providing services in Kampala? Or have you gone up country? Because I feel like a lot of people up country need these charge core services.
Yes, we are currently providing, so the events services are countrywide, because some of these events are in Ginger, some are in Ginger. Yes, some are in Fort Portal, and all around the country. However, we are deciding to pretty much start with the urban market, because we feel like this is where a lot of economic value is lost when a phone is off. So normally, if you're running a multi-million-dollar company, you could be, but yes, if you're running a multi-million-dollar company and your phone is off, maybe Bill Gates is sending you an email, and if you don't respond in 5 minutes, the opportunity is gone, and maybe you've lost $1 million. So just to put it down on ground, I feel like the urban mobile phone users are much heavier users of mobile phones. Actually,
they're using more applications, so their phone batteries is going down faster.
Yes, their phone battery goes down a lot more, and they're working on. The loss or the value of having their phone on is much higher, both economically and personally. So I feel like, that's why we decided to start with the urban market. However, we're not saying the rural market is not important. It definitely is, and we're looking to scale there in the near future, but more like with a different model, because people in villages have phones that can last them pretty much.
The capability can last for days.
Yes, they can last for days. However, the problem is they have to walk more than 7 kilometers, more than 5 kilometers just to get a charge. Okay. And not that walking is bad, it's also healthy, but having to walk for such basic things anytime you need them, or anytime you need to access such services is really not a very comfortable experience. So we're not ignoring that sector, but we are starting with where the I would call it utility delta is much higher. So the usefulness and the value created is much higher.
So in a way, your spread is going to, initially in Kampala, but then you're maybe looking at towns like Jinja, then Barra, then maybe Gulu, before you then spread out to say Arua.
Yes. Okay. So and that's basing on more like economic activity, mobile phone penetration in these particular locations. And then also we are definitely thinking about some of the fastest growing markets, mobile phone markets in on the continent, and that's so immediately speaking of DRC, Nigeria, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and maybe Kenya and Rwanda, because those are countries where by 2030 or 20 by 2030 will be these will be the places or countries with the highest mobile subscriber penetration. So you really want to be where the action is, because if people are buying very many phones, it means that they have a very huge need for charging, and they are definitely productive users. So we're looking to drive economic activity through this, through this simple thing that you would think is really tiny, but it's only when you experience that problem that you understand that, that email is not going out in the next 30 minutes.
I guess. Let me see. What my next question is, so have you looked on the market and no one else is providing the kind of service that you're providing?
So yes, there's, as Jesus said, many have come before me and many will come after me, saying all kinds of things. But yes, to put it into context, we've looked in the market and there's lots of people providing this service, but nobody is doing it like we do. So you look at, for example, Cafe Javas providing this service to their customers. But it's pretty much...
but you'd have to be there and buy very expensive coffee.
Yes. And also on the Cafe Java's side, they're pretty much providing it as a value add. Look at it pretty much like Wi-Fi. Most places have free Wi-Fi. And some places also have, Wi-Fi at a cost. Why? Because there are people who can pay for the Wi-Fi, and there are places which, your usage of their services indirectly, pays for all these, additional services. So at Serena, you'll definitely be paying their renovations by buying that soda at 5 times retail price.
And getting free Wi-Fi.
So, but then on the flip side, you have a few other people providing this service, and none of them is as branded as we are. Okay. We're the only ones doing this professionally, and none of these is providing as much value as we are, because we are pretty much putting this in the places of highest need, while most of our competitors are really looking at, okay, how do I make a quick buck? How do I put this thing anywhere as long as there's traffic? But we're taking I would say we're taking the most calculated approach compared to all our competitors. Not to steal their time. Yeah, I'm just being realistic.
When I was reading your profile, it's company profile, it's supporting, okay, fine, mobile devices, which we focused on quite a bit, but then also electric cars. Tell me about that.
So yes, it's a really, and really not to discount everything I said earlier, but I feel like that is exactly what gets me out of bed every day. The mobile phone charging delivers a lot of value, but in my opinion, it's something that is, it's more like a bird in hand, and it wouldn't take much to build something like that. However, the electric vehicle ecosystem is much bigger, and if you're taking a global view, most of the European countries are actually banning sale of internal combustion engine cars by between 2030 and 2050. So different countries have different timelines, and different cities also have different timelines. But on the flip side, even the manufacturers are cutting off production of internal combustion engine cars within a specific timeline, matching up to what the countries are doing. And then if you look at it from a country level, most of the continents actually, there's something that's going on which I would call a battery arms race. So the entire world is racing to build batteries for these electric vehicles. And of all those countries, all those continents, Africa is the most uniquely positioned in terms of mineral materials, mineral availability, but it's the least positioned in terms of mineral processing or mineral value addition, which then leads up to the battery production. So the US is incentivizing its ecosystem with a few $1 billion and a few, and all the tax breaks for the electric vehicle manufacturers. But then, for example, India is incentivizing production of battery materials without even any mineral resources to back up, to make the batteries. They're incentivizing their ecosystem with about $4 to $6 billion to set up local battery production facilities. And
then on the African continent?
On the African continent, just to put it into context, There are about 170 battery gigafactories being built across the world, and only one of those is in Africa.
Wow. Where is it?
It's in South Africa.
South Africa, okay.
So we're in a really terrible position at the moment.
Is this the dream, therefore, that you want, no, I shouldn't call it a dream. It's part of the things that ChargeCo wants to do, to be able to, you want to go into manufacturing of batteries or setting up charging points for the electric cars? Because you can also, I know that's also an industry. For example, in the UK, it's an industry where people go at petrol stations and then you charge your electric car. So they're in fact converting petrol stations into electric cars charging areas. Yes,
so it's definitely on our roadmap. And to start with, I mentioned the battery production ecosystem and pretty much the value addition on the battery minerals. And that's something we want to tackle, because building battery production facilities or gigafactories, as I would call it, is relatively simple, because there's lots of blueprints around. It's been done 170 times, or it's being done 170 times. However, on the side of battery mineral processing, to put it into context, there are four cobalt refineries in the world, and only one of them is outside China.
Really? And it's not on the African continent,
And
is it?
yes, and Africa provides, particularly DRC, which we were talking about earlier, provides 60% of the world's cobalt. So
these the one that is outside China, where is it? It's not on the continent.
It's not on the continent. But just to put it into context, there's a need. I mean, you really need to solve the hardest part of the problem and not the easiest part. So the easiest part is building the battery production facilities. The hardest part is building the mineral processing, so the cathode and anode processing and the mineral refineries. And then on the other side, the other hard part, further in the chain, in between the battery production and the consumer, person buying the electric vehicle, is actually charging infrastructure. Yes, so charging infrastructure is a real bottleneck, because if you let everyone set up his own charging infrastructure, then you're going to be in a position where everyone has their own charging standard, like it is in the US, like it is in the UK. And with all these various charging standards, for example, China has its own charging standards for its vehicles. Japan has its own charging standard. The UK has its own, Europe has its own charging standard. The US has its own charging standard. So it's like saying, it's like getting to a petrol station and they say, we don't have fuel for your BMW. Go to a BMW fuel station. So standardizing this and setting up an inclusive electric vehicle charging infrastructure is definitely what we're looking at tackling. So basically, these are the parts which would create a lot more value in the ecosystem compared to just selling a bunch of electric vehicles directly made from from Europe.
But we have the Kira, where we're setting up an entire manufacturing plant in Ginger for the Kira motor vehicle. The Kira EVs and electric vehicle. Then we already have the buses that are on the road. So where are we in that particular process, and how do you come into play? How are you having any policy discussions around that? For example, you're going to need a standard on charging stations. If we come up as a country, that whoever is producing electric, whoever is thinking of infrastructure, this is the standard that we will follow.
So currently ChargeCo is basically having discussions with a bunch of electric vehicle manufacturers in the country. And
we have several?
Yes.
I didn't know. Tell me about them.
So there is, and actually the biggest push is in electric motorcycles. Not vehicles. Not vehicles, because vehicles are still even expensive for the European market.
Yes, I was just about to say that who can afford an electric vehicle? I mean, it's very expensive. But an electric motorcycle
makes a lot more sense. So the buses are a good idea because it's a public service. So it will definitely be used without Damali having to buy the bus to get to work. But the bikes are also pretty much globally, they're at cost parity with the basic explanation for that is internal combustion engine motorbikes and electric motorbikes at pretty much the same price.
And pricing?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's a few things that need to be ironed out, like battery costs, like production at scale, like charging infrastructure, like funding for all these companies. But yeah, there's about three electric motorcycle players in Uganda. There's Jaguar New Energy. There is which is Chinese. There is Borderwork, which is Ugandan German owned, and there is Zembo, which is German owned. And
they're manufacturing. They're not bringing parts just to assemble.
So it's I would say Zembo is designing and then importing. Jaguar New Energy is importing and assembling, and then Borderwork is building from scratch and also converting. So converting, what you'd call the Bajaj BM100 to electric. So they basically swap out the ICE parts and put in electric parts. And
are they local? Are they indigenous Ugandan? Or?
So it's partly owned by a Ugandan and a German entrepreneur.
Okay, yes. That's interesting because we have of course a lot of borders around.
Yes,
and I always wonder if we had a lot of electric motorcycles, maybe and a lot of these borders are driven by men. Yes. I think I'd be more comfortable with an electric motorcycle.
Yes.
To drive it around if they were easily available.
Yes, because
I feel like they're easier to handle. They're really simple to.
They're really smooth, I would say. They are. I mean, from a maintenance perspective too, they are 75. They cost 75% less to maintain compared to an internal combustion engine bike, and they are, I would say, much safer for the environment. So you're eliminating the fumes and the pollution. You're eliminating the carbon emissions, and then you also because electricity is generated locally. We're not importing electricity from somewhere else. Then
and usually that's very expensive.
Yes,
but at least we have it. Yeah.
Yes, but if we're using electric vehicles in the country, it definitely puts us in a position where we don't have to import as much oil or fuel or petroleum products from abroad, and pretty much use our own electricity, which we actually have in excess.
Yeah, we're exporting it.
Yes, we're currently generating about 1,200 megawatts and utilizing about 600 megawatts. So half of our capacity. I think we're
exporting some of it as well.
Yes, we're exporting about 100.
Okay.
But by 2026, we'll be generating about 3,000 megawatts. And local consumption will have grown from 600 to only 1,000.
Okay.
So electric vehicles are an opportunity for us to take up a huge amount of that unused capacity. And I really get that we're pretty much building up all this generation capacity for industrialization. But how long does an industry take to set up? It takes years. And it also takes, setting up is one thing, but it takes years to ramp up production to full capacity. So you'll have the factory, and it can, at full capacity, it's supposed to produce 1,000 products per day. But then, they're starting with about 50 products per day. So
now, if we can go back to the electric motorcycles, I don't know, I'm more interested in that than the electric vehicles because I feel like they are more accessible, they're practical, they are environmentally friendly. I feel like they're also inclusive because a female can easily drive it. I know that. So, and now you're talking about the infrastructure part of it. How far are we in getting there? But then also on the local content because I also don't like these ideas where we become just assembling points.
Yes.
I want us to be able to produce our, motorcycles. We have Kira, we're producing it. So what about we produce our electric motorcycles, which can then be used by everyone? In a way, I think of a female in a rural area being able to drive this motorcycle because it's affordable.
Yes.
And then also it doesn't require a lot of, work for you to move around.
Kicking.
Yeah. So I feel like it will actually help a lot of in the transportation, in easing transportation for women.
Yes.
In rural areas,
yes.
especially if it's affordable.
Yeah.
And if we work on that infrastructure backbone, how do you charge it?
Yes. So ChargeCo is building a local, is basically designing a local charging station. So and we're building this around the charging and swapping model. So you can basically swap from the same charging station if you have a particular bike. And you can basically swap out used up battery for charged up battery, and then you can also charge. You can basically plug in and charge. So we're designing this basically in conjunction with the rest of the manufacturers. At the moment, we're still having discussions, but then on the local content side, we definitely want to be realistic that we don't have as good engineering talent, and as good an engineering ecosystem on the continent, and we want to get there progressively. So I believe what we're taking on as a roadmap is pretty much starting off with value addition, local value addition. So how do you bring this partly manufactured charging station from an OEM outside the continent, bring it here and have local value addition with your local companies or your local staff. So that is a lot more realistic and achievable compared to trying to build the entire charging station here. Now on the side of the vehicles, it's also something we're working on, because most of the batteries are not, and batteries take up between 25 to 75% of the cost of the bike.
Oh, really?
Yes. So we don't have any electric vehicle grade battery production on the continent, and it would be a lie to say we're going to make the small components here and then import something which constitutes about 75% and call it local content.
Okay.
So I would say we have to walk before we can run, and I feel like first of all, designing locally, local value addition. So how do you work with people who are already doing this internationally and have them train your local staff, have them design parts that resonate with your local context. So some of the best benchmarks are definitely, and we're actually having discussions with Indians, because Indians have really gone a mile in the electric motorcycle market. They have over 100 OEMs building these electric motorcycles, and they've figured out so much stuff that if we try to do on our own,
you'll be going back years.
Yes. Okay. So that's one of the things we're doing, basically benchmarking off of the Indian market and trying. And if you look at the internal combustion engine motorbikes here, most of them actually Indian manufactured. So Indians have mastered this art, but how do we collaborate maybe on a knowledge or technology exchange program or technology transfer program, and build something local or design something local or add value to something locally, which makes a lot more sense compared to bringing something already finished and just
dump it here.
Being a trader, just dumping it here. And I feel like that's a lot more realistic.
Okay.
For lack of a better word, yes.
So Geofrey, thank you so much for coming to speak to us on the Ideation Corner.
Thank you.
Do you have any last words?
Well, I would like to say that thank you for hosting me. This has been it's been a pleasure. And my last words are basically the future is really what you make it. And when you're working on all these things, it gets really frustrating to focus on the vision. But I mean, that doesn't give you a more realistic approach. So, I mean, how do you say, what are the steps I need to be taking now to achieve this goal? So I feel like with all the mentorship I've gotten from so many incredible people, one of the things that they keep, echoing back and forth is work on really ambitious things, because if you don't, someone else will. If you don't build your country, someone else will come and build it. And guess who will get the value? Them. And guess who will be to blame? You. Because, I mean, you really can't, $100 bills don't lie in the street long enough. So if these opportunities are here, and people are coming in from outside the country or outside the continent to exploit them, then what does that say about you, the indigenous people who are, or the locals who are, looking at these opportunities and not really utilizing them? So yeah, it's just a call out to all the youths to, dream big. It might be really hard. It might seem impossible to some extent, but, focus on the next step and yes, have that vision, but what can you start with now? We want to build, this entire electric vehicle ecosystem and supply chain. But we said, hey, let's start with charging phones in bars and restaurants. Because I feel like, yes, this is, a good next step that can get us, a bit closer to that bigger goal. It might take 25 years, it might take 50 years, but yeah, nothing worth building is Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither did it collapse in a day. So,
and you have to start.
Yes, you have to start. You have to start somewhere. You have to start small. You have to, but also on the other side, just to add this, we have a major problem of, financing for most of the young entrepreneurs. So there's so many dreamers, but very little capital going towards validating those dreams or making those dreams come true. So I would basically call upon the older generation who have actually built up a lot of expertise and capital to stop investing in apartments and taking flights and all these things that don't return as much. But I mean, build a legacy, invest in a startup, invest in a local entrepreneur. Even though it's not investing in, someone you don't know, start with investing in your own kids and encouraging them to be entrepreneurs rather than telling them to go look for a job in some corporate company, which was built, by the way, by another dreamer who came up with an idea and was financed by someone. So you can't be the dreamer and then the financier and then, the manager at the same time. So their experience comes in handy, their capital comes in handy, and I mean, our vision also comes in handy, and our energy also comes in handy. So, I mean, if all these work together, you can basically build a much better continent. Yeah.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. That was Geofrey. You heard from him. Please do subscribe to my channel on YouTube, and it's Ideation Corner. Thank you.